I grew up in a small town. There weren't many attractions or places to go to and do stuff, so I was kind of starving for interesting things to do as a kid. One of the few things I found fun when I was little was our church's fall festival. The festival was very popular, as our church was the biggest one in town and all the families showed up to celebrate every year. I remember almost always having a good time there. There were a bunch of prize games set up inside the church, and a bunch of activities to participate in outside, like three-legged races and dunk tanks and that sort of thing. One year, when I was still pretty young, I went to the festival with my mom, dad, and little sister. I dressed up as Robin Hood, who was my favorite character at the time. The four of us all stayed together inside the church for a while playing the games. But since I'd played them all a few times before, I got bored not long into the evening. I wanted to go outside and run around, climb stuff, throw things. But my parents didn't want my little sister to go out and roughhouse with the older kids because she could get hurt, so we split up. My dad was about to go with me, but at that age, my sister always had a strong favorite between our parents that flip-flopped day to day. Whoever was her favorite basically always had to be in her sight or she would get upset. And that day, my dad was her favorite, so my mom went outside with me. It was an unusually hot evening for late October that year, and the humidity was crazy high, so it felt like it was 90 degrees even as the sun was setting. That didn't stop me going full speed and full force at every physical activity they had though. On the other hand, my mom was sensitive to heat, so she sat on the sidelines most of the time watching me play. After about 45 minutes of playing, my mom called me over and said she had to use the bathroom, so I needed to take a break and go with her. The church had set up a few porta potties outside since there was only one bathroom inside. The porta potties were about 50 feet from the activity area, far enough not to be smelled but still in view. I went into the porta potty next to the one my mom went into, but I finished up much quicker than her. My mom told me to wait until she was finished, so I stood outside until she was done. Unfortunately, she was starting to take a long time. I knocked on the door a couple times to ask if she was almost finished, but it was really loud outside with all the kids screaming. All I could make out on the other end was, "I'm almost out," so I stayed put. More and more minutes passed. Then eventually, I realized the sun had completely set. It was very dark, and I knew it would only get darker as the sun's afterglow got weaker. The festival area was lit up, but the porta potties only had a single dim lamp shining on them, making them feel isolated from everything else. My mom still hadn't gotten out, so I knocked again. This time she didn't respond at all. That's when a man walked over from the festival area and asked if I needed help. I didn't recognize him from church, but I was worried about my mom, so I told him I thought she was stuck in there. He smiled and told me everything was fine. He said he would take me to get my dad so he could help me get my mom out. I wasn't sure about going with him, so I knocked on the door loudly and asked my mom if I could go with the man. My mom didn't respond. Instead, the man quickly took my hand away from the door and gripped it tightly, looking down with an intense grin. I was clearly confused, so the man said I shouldn't bother my mom since she was stuck and loud noises might scare her. At my naive age, this made sense to me on some level, but I still didn't think it was a good idea to go with the man. He saw the apprehension on my face and tried to reassure me. He said he wouldn't leave the crowd and that he would only go straight to where my dad was. This was enough to finally convince me. We started walking together while he kept such a tight grip on my hand that it started to hurt. When I tried to wriggle out of it, he grabbed even tighter, so I stopped trying. We headed toward the crowd at first, but then we veered left and headed toward the church. I knew that was where my dad was, but I didn't understand how the man could have known that too. Before I could think much about it, we turned away from the door and started walking behind the church, where a bunch of cars were parked in the grass. I was suddenly very afraid. I knew the man was lying to me. I tried again to get out of his grip, this time even digging my heels into the dirt, but it was no use. The man simply picked me up off my feet and held on to me, trapping me in his arms. As my last resort, I screamed for help. He put his hand over my mouth, but I had already alerted several people from the church. They came running towards us as the man carrying me broke out into a sprint. He got to his truck and opened the door, but just then, somebody slammed the door on his fingers. He screamed in pain and dropped me. I hit the ground hard and crawled away as fast as I could, while a small crowd of men from the church descended upon the man, forcing the door to stay shut in his fingers so he couldn't get away. He was interrogated by the men about what he was trying to do with me, but he wouldn't admit to anything. The sheriff was called to arrest him, but at some point, before they arrived, he managed to slip away. Everyone who saw his face confirmed that he was nobody from the church and probably wasn't even from town. He just drove in one day with the intention of kidnapping a young boy. He hasn't been seen in our town since, that's for sure. As for my mom, she had a medical emergency in the porta potty and passed out. It was related to the heat and dehydration, combined with a disorder she already had that I didn't know about. The incident frightened me as a kid, but looking back on it now, feels even more terrifying, knowing what fate I narrowly avoided.